revert herself back, or I guess restore herself back to normal. But what we also see is that Adam Warlock appears to be reaching for the Infinity Gauntlet. Now, what it is that he intends to do here is something we're not entirely sure of, although we're more or less led to believe that maybe he's going to take this chance while she's talking to strip her of the Infinity Gauntlet. But what Adam Warlock does here is it seems as though he touches the Infinity Gauntlet. He touches the gem on the back of the hand, and when he does, the Silver Surfer is blasted with some form of energy. And what we also see is that as a result of her actions with restoring everything back to the way it was before, that the Shrine of Mistress Death is no longer there. And so they're more or less just standing on an asteroid, which presumably was what Thanos had used to create the Shrine of Mistress Death. And again, Nebula is demonstrating the fact that she doesn't know that Adam Warlock was here, and the fact that she doesn't know that he's left, that he's no longer in the scene anymore. And so what she asks is how it is that Doctor Strange and the Silver Surfer are still there when presumably they should have been destroyed. And so what she recognizes here, what she more or less theorizes here, is that this presumably was due to the actions of Doctor Strange. This was due to the actions of him intervening against her will. And so what she does is she imprisons the hands of Doctor Strange to keep him from being able to use his magic. But what we see Thanos commenting on here is telling Nebula that it was another error in judgment, that she had yet again screwed up, and that it's something that she has been fortunate about so far, that the errors in her judgment haven't necessarily been major. But what she's about to learn is the fact that when she set everything back to 24 hours prior, that she didn't fully think it through. And the reason why is because 24 hours prior to the current events, the cosmic entities were not imprisoned. They were still free. And so what we see is that the cosmic entities have now been released from their binds. And more or less what's going to take place is an attempt by the cosmic entities to destroy Nebula. But what we see is that we transition back to the Soul World, to inside of the Soul Gem with Adam Warlock and the Silver Surfer. And it appears as though when the Silver Surfer was struck by some form of energy from the Gauntlet, that it may not necessarily have been a killing blow from Nebula, more so than Adam Warlock entering the Soul Gem and pulling the Silver Surfer in with him. And what the Silver Surfer asks Adam Warlock here is why they're back in Soul World, why they're back inside of the Soul Gem. And what Adam Warlock says here is that his power is greatest within the Soul Gem, that he is bound to the Soul Gem in ways that he's not fully understanding of, but that it's such a bind that it allows him to utilize his full potential. Now, the reason for this goes all the way back to the very beginnings of Adam Warlock, when he was given the Soul Gem by the High Evolutionary in an attempt to take back the Counter-Earth. But that's, of course, a story that we're not necessarily going to get into. But what we see Adam Warlock saying here is, I guess, explaining to the Silver Surfer what he had previously explained to Thanos, or what we were already aware of, that in order for Adam Warlock to successfully bring an end to the Infinity Gauntlet event, that the Infinity Gauntlet had to change hands, that it had to leave Thanos' hands and go into the hands of somebody else. Now, whether or not it was going to be Nebula or whether it had to be somebody else is something that's not explained to us, and in this instance, I don't really think it really matters. But what Adam Warlock says is that Nebula's confusion here, the fact that she is overwhelmed for the most part due to the, I guess, sensory input of the Infinity Gauntlet, of all the facets of reality, in addition to her recognition of newfound power, led her in a place where it was very easy to take advantage of that. It was very easy to use that to their advantage. And so what we see is that the Silver Surfer realizes that Adam Warlock knew that Thanos was going to lose the Infinity Gauntlet. And so the question is, what are they going to do now? What's going to take place? And Adam Warlock simply says that he's going to do what needs to be done, and that in order for this to succeed, he's going to need the Silver Surfer as a spiritual anchor. From here, we transition back to Nebula, and what we see is that Galactus and Eon and the Celestials and various other cosmic beings are using their power to attempt to overpower Nebula. And again, Nebula is able to use the Infinity Gauntlet, even if only on a base level, and Thanos explains this to us. Thanos tells us that even a bumbling idiot, for the most part, would be able to use the extreme power of the Infinity Gauntlet to override the power of the cosmic entities, just because of the fact that even on a subconscious level, they would simply just not want to be defeated. And so the Infinity Gauntlet would exercise that power accordingly. But what we learn is that, again, Thanos is commenting on the fact that Nebula, using the infinite power of the Infinity Gauntlet, is able to easily overpower the cosmic entities. She's able to defeat them readily. And what we see is that, for the most part, the cosmic entities appear to be entirely imprisoned. They appear to be cast into some form of stone and completely locked up. And what we also see taking place here is that Nebula is more or less stating that her reign of supremacy is just beginning, that her reign of omnipotence has just started, and that she's going to be effectively taking over everything. Now, what we see is that she's telling Thanos that he is going to be able to bear witness to a new astral dynasty. He's going to be able to bear witness to the new reality that she is creating, and that there's going to be a whole new era ushered in with regards to the Earth 616 universe. Then we see Thanos saying, "Let there be something," and Adam Warlock says, "Disharmony." And this is very interesting here, because what Adam Warlock has done here is he's more or less merged himself with the Soul Gem. And by merging himself with the Soul Gem, he has reached out to the other 5 gems. And when he reached out to the other 5 Infinity Gems, he forced them to feed back onto Nebula. And when this happened, the Infinity Gauntlet became more than Nebula could bear, and so Nebula threw the Infinity Gauntlet down. And so at this point, there's no one in possession of absolute power. Everybody has a base set of abilities. At this point, we learn what it was that Doctor Strange was doing when he was using his powers. And what he had done is that when everything was set back to normal, that the Earthbound superheroes had all been restored, and they were set back to their previous forms. And so he's called in some of the more prominent members, some of the more powerful and strong members of the Earthbound superheroes, which of course include Eric Masterson as Thor, Drax the Destroyer, and the Incredible Hulk, along with Eros. And he opens a portal to allow them to enter. But what we also see here is that Thanos has broken free of his binds. And for the most part, this is a very interesting set of circumstances, because what we're going to be seeing is that while Doctor Strange uses his power to attempt to confine the Infinity Gauntlet, that Nebula knocks him off guard. And when she does, the bauble, or I guess the bubble that encloses the Infinity Gauntlet, goes away. And so we see, in effect, this mad dash for absolute power. We see everybody rushing to try to gain this Infinity Gauntlet. We see that the Incredible Hulk is considering the Infinity Gauntlet for himself. Eros is trying to grab the Gauntlet. Thanos is trying to grab the Gauntlet. And Drax the Destroyer is trying to beat up the Incredible Hulk. What we also see is that amidst the conflict, amidst the fray, that Adam Warlock reemerges from the Soul Gem, and when he does, he takes possession of the Infinity Gauntlet, and he simply says, "Let the conflict end." And what's really intriguing about this is that this is one of the foremost pivotal panels, or one of the foremost pivotal moments in Marvel Comics, and it's one of the most recognized moments in Marvel Comics, simply because it heralds the end of the Infinity Gauntlet event, and ushers in the story of Warlock and the Infinity Watch. But what we see as we continue here is that Adam Warlock begins to take on this mantle, begins to take on this role of trying to achieve godhood as best he can, of trying to more or less become a perfect god in his eyes. And he says that he will deal with everything that has taken place in his own fashion. And initially, people are a little skeptical here. People are a little unsure. Thanos says that the gauntlet inherently belongs to him, and Adam Warlock replies by saying that he would simply lose it again because he doesn't really desire it. Nebula says that the gauntlet belongs to her, and the question she asks Adam Warlock is, what right does he have to power? What right does he have to the Infinity Gauntlet? And Adam Warlock simply says the Infinity Gauntlet is in his possession, and that's right enough. And so what we see Adam Warlock saying is that his power with the Infinity Gauntlet is a claim that they would all do well not to dispute, and that he is going to more or less set everything to the way it's supposed to be. Now, what we'll see in Infinity Gauntlet issue number 6 part 2 is we will pick up with what all is going to happen after Adam Warlock gains the Infinity Gauntlet, what it is that he does here, and whether or not Adam Warlock will actually be able to demonstrate himself as a true and fair god, or whether he will succumb to the corruption that the Infinity Gauntlet, involves with regards to people who are wielding it. So, with the second half of Infinity Gauntlet issue number 6, we get a conclusion to this story. We get an end to the Infinity Gauntlet event. And picking up where we left off with Infinity Gauntlet issue number 6, part 1, what we saw was that Adam Warlock had attained the Infinity Gauntlet for himself, and that he had promised to be a fair and just God. And so, what we see Adam Warlock saying here is that he promises to use this power wisely, that he promises not to abuse this power in the same fashion that Nebula or Thanos had. And what's really interesting here is that, for the most part, Adam Warlock seems very sincere here. He seems as though it really is his intention to be a good guy. And the question that the Incredible Hulk has is, what are they going to do about Thanos and Nebula? What's going to happen with them now? And Drax the Destroyer, of course, being a being that was created for the destruction of Thanos, takes it upon himself to say that Thanos is his, that he's going to try to kill Thanos here. But of course, Thanos is easily able to overpower both the Incredible Hulk and Drax the Destroyer. From here, we switch to Thanos saying that he's activated some kind of a thermonuclear device on his belt line, and that it's set to activate in about 15 seconds. And Silver Surfer asks why. Why would Thanos kill himself? And Thanos says that for him, death is preferential to imprisonment. Now, he doesn't really explicitly say this, but I would even go as far as to speculate that for Thanos, if he were to die, he would find absolute happiness within the realm of Mistress Death. But again, every instance that we've seen with Thanos where he has gone after Mistress Death has always been an attempt to be by her side, to be her equal, more so than a person who simply just exists inside her realm. And so what we see is that Eric Masterson takes the hammer of Thor and hits Thanos with it. And when he does, Thanos is knocked away from the newly restored Shrine of Mistress Death and out into the depths of space, where he explodes, presumably killing him. And this is what everybody takes on. Everybody takes on this mantle that Thanos has been killed, that Thanos is now dead. He's no longer part of this conflict anymore. And so we see that Eros steps up and says that as a member or representative of the state of Titan, that he's taking custody of Nebula for himself. And Eros has grounds to do this because, again, as far as everybody here knows, Nebula is a relative of Thanos. And so by extension, she's a relative of Eros, and so Eros is for the most part just settling family issues here. And so Adam Warlock agrees with this. Adam Warlock says that's fine, and he teleports Eros, Drax the Destroyer, Nebula away, but then also teleports the Incredible Hulk away, presumably back to the planet Earth. And so the only people that we have left are the Silver Surfer, Eric Masterson, and Doctor Strange. And the question that's asked here by the Silver Surfer is why? Why are they still here when everybody else has been sent away? And Adam Warlock says that they have gazed into the depths of his heart. They know him the way nobody else does. And for the most part, Adam Warlock is saying here that they are the only individuals who know him well enough that when he says that he will be a god who can be trusted, that he means it. And so he sends them forward to tell other people this is true. And again, this is very much tapping into the element of Adam Warlock representing a Jesus Christ-like figure in Marvel Comics. Because again, if you go back and watch our discussion on Adam Warlock, if you go back and listen to what it was that we were saying, that Adam Warlock was introduced to us as a Christ-like figure. He had simply just emerged one day. He was created. He was, I guess, crucified by Man-Beast on the Counter-Earth during that storyline. And of course, he had resurrected himself on several occasions. And so this is tapping back into that in the same way that Jesus had informed his disciples that he was truly the Son of God and to go forth and to spread his word, that Adam Warlock is doing much the same thing. And for the most part, what we see is that these superheroes are kind of questioning this. They're saying, is this really true? Can they really go forward and say that Adam Warlock is a fair and true God? Because as Doctor Strange says, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Adam Warlock asks them if the idea of replacing their chaos, the chaos that is their lives, with with order if it would be something unpalatable. And again, what we see is that they're reacting in such a way to where for them this is scary, that not only would their lives be irrevocably changed if Adam Warlock chose to do so, but that Adam Warlock looks at them as chaotic beings, and that his role is to replace their chaos with order, to in effect make the universe the way he sees fit. And so for them, they look at this as though he's taking the first few steps towards becoming corrupted by the power of the Infinity Gauntlet. But Adam Warlock is able to quell their concerns to a degree. He says that the distance between who he was now, or who he was then and who he is now, is something insurmountable, that not even he realizes the differences, and that he thought that he could speak with them and tell them that he would be fair. He thought that he could demonstrate that he would be a fair God, but that it doesn't seem as though they are willing to buy into this cause. And so what we see is that Adam Warlock teleports them away. At this point, we switch to Adam Warlock 60 days into the future with Gamora and Pip. And what Adam Warlock tells Pip is that they're going to meet someone. They're going to go on a journey. And he says, for the most part, that this is something that's happened time and time again. And so what it seems is that Adam Warlock has manipulated the time gem to travel 60 years into the future on several occasions to see if it's possible for things to turn out differently. But what he tells us is that it always turns out the same way. And so what we see is they're walking along is that it appears that Thanos is standing in the cornfields, that Thanos is simply just waiting their arrival. But when they get to it, they realize that it's simply just a scarecrow wearing his suit. And Adam Warlock comments on this and says that it's an empty shell of what was, that it appears as though Thanos has cast aside his old mantle of attempting to usurp absolute power and seems to maybe just be living a quiet life. And indeed, that's what we learn. We learn that when they approach a house relatively close to the cornfields, that Thanos emerges wearing some kind of garb, some kind of maybe monk-like garb, or an outfit that simply just allows him relative comfort, and he tells Adam Warlock that he should have known that it would be him, that he would come for him eventually. And Adam Warlock more or less just greets Thanos as a friend here, at the very least, if not a friend, as a person who's certainly not an enemy. And so what Adam Warlock says is that there are no secrets from him. Having absolute knowledge and absolute power within the universe grants him the knowledge of knowing what all is going on in the universe at that very moment. And so Thanos comments and says that the memory of having absolute power is very dim for him, and that he asks Adam Warlock why he had waited so long to gain vengeance. And again, Adam Warlock comments and says, why is it that he always asks the same question, indicating that this has repeated itself on several occasions, that Adam Warlock has traveled into the future several times, and that this circumstance always plays out the same way. And Thanos seems to recognize this. Thanos says that he supposes that he always asks the same question, and that is a bit confusing, which of course tells us that Thanos, while he doesn't necessarily recall every facet of the Infinity Gauntlet event, at the very least remembers what it was like to hold that absolute power. And what Adam Warlock tells Thanos is that he's looking for some advice, more likely advice on how to wield the Infinity Gauntlet effectively. And Thanos simply says to either endure it or to surrender to its power. And Adam Warlock says this really isn't the kind of comfort he was looking for. Now, what it was that he was looking for with Thanos is something that we actually don't learn. We don't learn what it was that he was trying to gain from Thanos here, what it was he was trying to get Thanos to say. All we know is that he went to Thanos for advice on what to do, and Thanos gave him a couple words that didn't really seem to comfort him that well. And so, for the most part, Adam Warlock, Gamora, and Pip take their leave. They choose to go ahead and leave Thanos to his thoughts. And what we see is that for the most part, Thanos is simply just living a quiet life here, that after everything that's gone on, after everything that has taken place, that Thanos is taking this time to, to collect himself, to decide what his next move is going to be, whether or not he's still going to continue his path for trying to gain absolute power again, or if he is simply just going to try to live a quiet life. And again, touching back on Thanos' character within the Marvel Universe, we learn, of course, later on that Thanos goes after the heart of the universe, which, of course, grants him absolute power once more. But for the most part, we're left with Thanos here on his personal thoughts, as he says that for the most part, he thinks that he came out on top with this particular event, that Adam Warlock is undergoing a process, that he's undergoing a change, and that he holds a heavy burden in the fact that he has absolute power, and so he has to constantly be on guard. He has to constantly be vigilant, because even the slightest subconscious thought could lead to the ruin of all. And so again, Thanos says that he doesn't envy Adam Warlock, and that at the end of the day, that after everything is all said and done, that Thanos came out on top here. Now his statement in terms of coming out on top is twofold. The first half is that he's managed to eliminate the burden of absolute power. This is no longer something he has to deal with, and so his mind is at ease. But the other half, the second part of this, is that Adam Warlock is going to undergo something called the Trial of Warlock, whereby he will be called before the living tribunal at the behest of the cosmic entity Eternity, along with the other cosmic entities, to determine whether or not he is capable of being able to wield the Infinity Gauntlet. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end, and I really hope you guys enjoyed the Infinity Gauntlet story. It is, in fact, I would consider to be one of the absolute best stories to ever been created in the Marvel Comics events. With that being said, I will catch you guys later. Peace.